Hi everyone. This is our final project for AP Statistics Trimester 3. I'm Jacob Spurgis. I'm Shane West and Ryan Cartman also worked on this with me. I'll kind of be running you through what we found from our question, which is, are housing prices greater in cities with a top 150 ranked university versus the average housing price in the United States? So here we go. Introduction. Since all of us will be going to college at some point, we are interested in seeing what areas are expensive and what areas are affordable to live in for college students. We were also highly interested because we wondered whether or not top colleges bring added price with them and whether or not this pricing affects the city or just the areas surrounding the city. Our null hypothesis is that the average price of housing for a top 150 college in the U.S. College city in the U.S. is equivalent to the average price of a house in the U.S. Our alternative hypothesis is that the average price of housing for a top 150 college in the U.S. is greater than the average price of a house in the United States. Then moving on to data collection, we randomly selected from a select population, and for our various methods of reducing bias, we use the same two websites, Redfin and Forbes. Forbes we use to find the top 150 ranked universities, and from there we go to the cities, and that's where we find our average mean housing price for the cities of the top 150 ranked universities. And we use Redfin to find those housing prices. So Forbes was the way to find the universities, and Redfin was the way to find the housing prices. And we'll go to this document here to see kind of how we found our data. For our data collection, we focused on a random sample of 30 of the top 150 universities. We took a list of the top 150 universities, and using a random number generator, assigned each top 150 university a number 1 through 150. We then randomly generated 30 unique numbers. Universities corresponding to the numbers generated in the study were used, and we would find the city from that top 150 universities selected, and we would find the housing average housing price through Redfin. And once we found those 30, I think it was actually 31 values, we averaged all those, and then we compared it to the mean housing price for all of the U.S. Kind of to reduce that bias and variability, we focused on meeting all the conditions. We didn't want to leave anything up to chance with our significance test and confidence interval, so we worked hard to make sure those conditions were met. We also made sure that the cities that were selected were not kind of in the same vicinity as other cities, so that the housing prices would not affect each other. And we also made sure our sample was greater than 30, meeting the central limit theorem. Other than conditions, I would say we tried to limit bias by being completely independent from opinion, and we tried to use the same website as I said before, with Forbes and Redfin, so that our data couldn't be skewed by different websites, different prices, different estimates, and that sort of thing. So we'll go back to the presentation and move on to our graph and summary statistics. For our table of values, we'll go to this site right here. And we can see that we had some outliers. Madison County was really low, 175,000, much lower than the next value, which is about 300,000 in Middleton. And we can also see we had a really high outlier with Stanford, about $3.62 million is the average housing price to live there. So that was really, really high. We think that definitely skewed our data. You can see here the U.S. average was 412,000, and we can already kind of see from this table here that most likely our alternative hypothesis is going to be true, as it's looking very likely that top 150 university cities have a higher average housing price than the U.S. And then we'll go back here and go to our graph. So we'll go down here, and we can see that that Stanford value is definitely really an outlier here. Madison County not as much, but Stanford definitely skewing that data. And we can already see that from this graph that most likely our alternative hypothesis is definitely going to be true. Our mean was 864,000 about, and our mean for the US was 412,000. So we can see that our alternative hypothesis is almost definitely true here. Other than that, other values we found was the mean being about 850, the standard deviation being about 120,000, the minimum being 175,000, the Q1 being 412,000, the median being 664,000, the Q3 being 990,000, and the maximum being 3,620,000. So we'll move on from that, go to our analysis, confidence interval here. And you can see that we met the whole 4-step process here. All our conditions were met, and here's the work here. And we concluded that our interval from about 206,000 to 696,000 captures the true difference in means between mean housing price in a city with a top 150 ranked university versus mean housing price in the United States. We can definitely see here that for a confidence interval, there is for sure increased price for a top 150 ranked university city versus the average housing price in the US. And then we'll go back here and go to our significance test. And our significance test kind of nailed this home. As you can see, we again met the 4-step process. We did our steps, we had our work. Our p-value was basically 0, incredibly low p-value, as you can see here. And we concluded that because our p-value is less than 0.05, we can definitely reject the null. And there's definitely convincing evidence that a true mean average housing price for a top 150 college city in the US is greater than the true mean average housing price in the whole of the United States. All right, and then coming back to our conclusion, as we can see from our test, the hypothesis was pretty much proven to be correct, and that's for both the significance test and the confidence interval. As we saw from the confidence interval, the difference in means was very large. 206,000 to 696,000 was the 95% confidence interval for the difference in means. So that's quite a heavy difference. So we can pretty much assume that there is an increase from a top 150 college city in housing price versus the average housing price for the US in general. And for our significance test, we saw that the p-value was extremely small for this to happen by chance. So we can pretty much assume that that also affirms our alternative hypothesis. In terms of changing our study, we believe there was a lot of errors in this data collection, and the overall analysis could have been a lot more specific. So we really think increased sample size would have helped here. Perhaps 100 instead of 30 top 150 university cities would have been a lot better. We also thought that the strong outliers could have really skewed the data, and that could have potentially messed up our data. As you saw from the ones like Stanford and Wesley being in there twice, those could have really affected our data in the long run. And we also thought that state-by-state bias might affect this. Particularly, there's a lot of top 150 universities in California, New York, so we're kind of skipping out on some states in the middle. And so we thought this might be affecting the housing price, potentially bringing it up. And so those were kind of our concerns. But overall, we still think that our conclusions we made were precise, accurate, and appropriate for our sample size. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.